Sounding good. So I'm going to slide away.
Right. Are we all ready with our audacities?
Audacity is go.
I am.
Right. On 6.
Audacity, ready!
Audacity, assemble!
I love you guys. On 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did we all do that on 6?
I did it on 6, not then 7.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it just sounded really staggered.
Mm.
Oh, well.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah. Right.
Let Ryan fix it in post.
Is it Ryan's week to edit?
I think so, yeah. I was last week, so.
Right. Yeah, it will be then. Okay, who wants to welcome in? So me, then.
It's just because I haven't got the script.
Okay, is that going to be the intro now?
That could well be the intro, actually. Yes. Welcome to Cinema Eclectica, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are the Geek Show's dedicated movie podcast. I'm Graham, and this week I've been joined by...
Aidan.
Sarah.
Yep. And later on in the show, it's our photo negative week this week, which means we flip the usual structure of the show. Normally, we do a new release up first, and then we have reviews of home releases in the second half of the show. But this is a photo negative. There are so many interesting things out next week, some of which we even got to see. That we're reviewing a whole load of them in the back end. But first, we have a pick from our director's lottery, and it came out with Leos Carax. And when we were discussing which Leos Carax film to do, I found out that you guys had not seen Holy Motors.
Correct. No, I'd never seen it.
No.
Or indeed any film by Leos Carax.
It was most
Same
shocking.
here, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was most shocking because, as Mick said, he was pretty sure that watching Holy Motors was part of the Cinema Eclectica citizenship test.
Really?
How did I smuggle under the radar then? Because I've been on here for ages.
Look, it's a French art film and Mick's seen it. There aren't many of those.
It's fair play, fair play.
Okay, well.
So, normally around this time in the show, we do a synopsis.
Well, why don't you handle that, Graham?
You're the Carax expert. Go ahead.
I genuinely think we could probably review this by just taking the audience through what happens. Listeners, if you haven't seen Holy Motors either, here's what you need to know. It starts with a man in bed, played by Leos Carax himself, who discovers that there is a secret door in his apartment.
He has nice wallpaper.
He has great wallpaper, quality pajamas too, I think.
It says something about
Those
a film where
glasses,
I noticed the wallpaper.
Yes. He finds that the key to the door is growing out of one of his fingers.
Yeah.
So he unlocks it and he goes into a cinema where a young child and a huge dog are wandering around the aisle.
Yep.
Now,
yeah, and I was
norm-
pleased at that point because I was thinking, oh, excellent, there's doggies in this. They're excellent. It's brilliant.
Yeah. It's true that under normal circumstances, you might expect that to have something to do with the rest of the film.
Yeah. Yes, I was totally disappointed about that.
Under these circumstances, we then turn to Monsieur Oscar, a man whose job involves travelling in a limousine and doing a variety of jobs. He is picked up by Edith Scubb, the star of Eyes Without a Face and Bunwell's The Milky Way, and driven out to be a homeless woman.
Yeah, there's nothing else you can say about that. That's
No.
just literally what happens.
No, yeah.
He sort of dresses
It'll be the words.
in...
It'll be the words of a fool to. It'll be the words of a fool to come up with something witty there.
Yes. But this is what Monsieur Oscar does. He is driven from place to place in this limousine, and he does a variety of tasks, some of which apparently result in his death, none of which seem to affect him in any way, all of which end with him going back to the limousine and driving out to do something else completely inexplicable.
And each of which involves a costume change of some kind and makeup and or hair.
Yes.
Yes.
So I suppose maybe the easiest way into it would be, what was everyone's favourite job that he did?
Easily the bit where he turns into, I like to think, Rasputin, the mad monk, and then bites a model's fingers off.
Yes.
Well, personally, when he died and I thought the film was over.
So,
literally true.
Mixed feelings enjoyment-wise, then.
Yeah. I couldn't make a head or tail of it. I mean, it's a triumph of style over substance for me. I couldn't understand it. So,
but what style, right?
Which is acceptable.
I when I first watched it, I enjoyed it mainly as just a collection of remarkable vignettes. I would say my personal favourite is the musical interlude.
Oh yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Where he leads an army of accordionists around a huge church, which I'm trying to make it sound as incredible as it is. It's all shot in one take, and it's just, I don't know, it has to be seen to be believed, I think.
Yeah, it's a nice
it is
sequence.
pretty incredible stuff, mate.
And it sort of raises the energy a bit for a while, just because you've been sort of a bit brought low, and that livens things up a bit.
Because the one before it is one of the more sort of socially satirical bits where he plays a teenage girl's father who's like berating her for not getting into a party she's at enough. And I think there is this vein in it of... Does anyone remember Chris Morris's series, Jam? Where he would just...
Okay, yeah.
He would just do these sort of sketches about people in the sort of wee small hours of the night, and it would involve overturning some sort of predicted kind of social mannerism or taboo.
Yeah, and flip it.
Yeah. And I think Holy Motors has that strain to it as well. I mean, there is this suggestion that there are hundreds of these people running around and we just don't notice.
Yeah, it's... I mean, yeah, the end sequence sort of makes you think that. Yeah.
Which is one of...
I mean, I did get the impression... Oh.
No, go on.
I did get the impression watching... I did get the impression that Denny Levant is essentially playing a version of Mr. Ben, where he's doing all these costume changes.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. I was thinking it was like Denny Levant's live action CV for the same reason. It's just, as an actor, he was just like, can we see your CV? And he should just say, oh, have you seen the film Holy Motors? Because that's my entire range in one film.
That's my show reel.
That's my show reel.
He is incredible, isn't he, Denis Lavant, though?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Very adaptable, very capable of change. Flexible.
Yeah. Literally flexible in one case.
Yeah. But that thing you were saying earlier about a lot of these type of beings that slip in and out of people's lives, that's an interesting thing. If you've ever had like random mood swings and you're thinking, what's happening? Oh, I was possessed. That's what it was. It's not my fault.
I was Denis Lavant for a bit. I knew it. It's funny because at the time when this premiered at Cannes in 2012, in one of Cannes' weirdest ever years, I mean, this, Post Tenebris Lux and Cosmopolis were all in. I mean, crikey. There was a general sense that this was something to do with that very French obsession about the death of cinema, that it's interspersed with the kind of proto-cinema images that Edward Muybridge shot in the 1880s.
Yeah, so I realised that there was something like that going on. It was kind of harking back to the old days, and little punctuation from Edward Muybridge, or Edward Muybridge as well, he's also known as. It's just, there's something... taking you historically back, as if to reach back in time and say this is a historical phenomenon and it has long shadows.
And that, I suppose, part of what Oscar's job is about now is about non-corporeality. I aim high, I get there in the end. I think that's a fair point. He undergoes horrible physical injuries which never affect him. He becomes a CGI character. The film itself starts data moshing at one point. So
there's also an innovative nasal hair recognition system.
Oh, of course, yes.
Just before he goes into cavort with La Undulating Cyber Femme. And you can almost smell the rubber.
Yes. Worryingly, yes.
Yeah. Do you think that's kind of a niche area of Pornhub? Reptilian cyber shagging.
I've been having internet problems, listeners, and I just came in back on that comment. Joyce.
And then at one point, I was just like, flipping heck, so that's a willy then. That's like a total erection then. That took me by surprise.
Are we talking about that bit when he's in the sewers?
Yes, with Eva Mendes.
Yeah, I keep, you know, it's very weird because you just end up staring and just thinking, is that a prosthetic?
Yes, exactly. And I was thinking, I don't think it is. It's too kind of quirky shape-wise to be a prosthetic. I think it veers off in a direction, doesn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
Come for the movie reviews, stay for the speculation about the shape of Denis Lavant's penis. The thing that struck me watching it again now, actually, before we talk about this, shall we talk about some of the rest of the cast? Because it is Lavant's show and he deserves like major mentions whenever we talk about this. But there are other people in it. We've mentioned Mendes. It's got Kylie Minogue in it.
Totally got Kylie in it, yeah. Bursting into song.
Do you know who suggested casting Kylie Minogue to Denis Lavant?
No.
Not Denis
Was it-
Lavant, too. Leos Carax, sorry.
No.
No.
Key.
It was only Claire Bloody Denis.
No.
Oh!
Big Kylie fan, apparently.
To be fair, actually, that doesn't surprise me at all, learning that fact.
Who's Claire Denis?
She did High Life.
Oh, she did. I knew the name from somewhere. Oh, cool. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
And Denis Lavant was in one of her most acclaimed films, Beau Travail. Yeah,
Yeah.
so...
But Beau Travail is... It doesn't come through in High Life, but Beau Travail is definitely evidence that Claire Denis does not have the taste in music you expect from a French intellectual.
Hence Kylie.
Hence Kylie.
Yeah. Mm.
She's rather good in it, I thought. It was the first time I'd seen her act for, like, ages.
Yeah, a long time since we've seen her act. That's exactly what I thought. And when I was watching her, I was thinking, oh, that's her off Neighbours.
But yeah, what struck me when I watched it this time is, having sort of absorbed all this discourse about it being about cinema, which I still think is true. I just think there's more to it. What I thought this time is, did Leos Carax just predict the gig economy?
Yeah, and it's only 7 years old, but it seems more futuristic than that. It still feels like a very now film.
Yeah. So I was quite impressed by that. I also have a pet theory, which I've not seen reflected anywhere else, and I'm going to use this show as my body pulpit, which is that it is his stealth adaptation of The Confidence Man by Herman Melville. Which
I haven't read, so you might need to elucidate.
I'm an ignoramus when it comes to reading, so carry on.
Well, I don't think anyone would blame you for this, because you know how famously Moby Dick was one of those things that was a big flop when it was published.
Yeah.
Well, after that, he tried to write his career by publishing a book called Pierre or the Ambiguities, which was an even bigger flop.
Oh dear.
But one of its fans was Leos Carax, who later made a film called Polar X, which is based on Pierre or the Ambiguities. Melville only wrote one novel after that. It was called The Confidence Man. It was about a man on a Mississippi paddleboat who goes around changing his identity to fit in with whatever the other passengers want him to be.
Ah.
Right. Okay.
So I wonder whether Leos Carax wanted to follow his adaptation of Melville's penultimate novel by making an adaptation of his last novel. But he then broke the chain, because obviously the logical way to do that would be to make that your last film. But he's already working on a Sparks musical starring Adam Driver, the most joyous sentence it's possible to say.
Is Adam Driver off to catch a whale of some kind?
Yeah.
He's going to struggle to fit Melville into the back catalogue of Sparks, I think. But yeah, have I turned anyone around on this?
I mean, I've been when I was last in Paris, I saw a live show that was that this reminded me of, and it was very much, you are struck by the visual, and you're told as you're going in that this is a play, but it's not. It's like a series of, like you say, vignettes, I suppose. The live show that I saw it didn't have any depth to it at all. It was just the visual, the costumes, the dancing, and there wasn't even a story to my recollection, but it was a while ago. And this sort of reminds me of that, like a European feast for the eyes type thing, of something that might provoke some thinking or to distract you for an afternoon, maybe.
When I was last in Paris, I also saw a live show with some contortionists in rubber, but we'll draw the discreet veil over that.
When I was in Paris, I didn't see Undercover Boss featuring God, which this film is kind of like.
Yes.
It did have such a biblical feel to it. I mean,
elaborate on that. I haven't worked out a religious reading yet.
I don't know whether I don't know which religion it would be, but it just felt like he could be like a kind of symbol for God. He can't die, and there's other characters that are sort of Immaculate Virgin. There's like an almost Pieta moment with Eva Mendes and him in the sewer, although normally in Michelangelo's depiction of the Pieta, he doesn't have a giant erection, but there's another character called Grace, and there's sort of a few religious themes that sort of crop up there for me.
I'm really excited to watch it again now and see if I can spot those.
I'm so sorry. Did you hear that originally Kate Moss was down to play the model, but they changed it to Eva Mendes instead?
Yeah, because she's called KM.
Yeah, I know. They didn't even bother to change the character name, which is a bit rude to Eva Mendes. We're going to call you KM.
Maybe his next film will have Kate Moss as a character called Eva.
Eva, yeah.
I think all credit to Eva Mendes for being in the most whacked scene in this incredibly odd movie.
Yeah, she just did absolutely nothing. I just wonder if she was maybe the notion of beauty, or because she had a backpack with arrows in it, or a quiver as it's supposedly known, is that she was maybe a huntress or like a Diana figure or something like that.
Perhaps.
I don't know.
What were you going to say, Aidan?
I can't contribute to this conversation because I still got nothing. I'll be honest.
Has it not helped?
I don't know what to make of this.
I wonder if he's like gone through the muses, or with Kylie being a singer. And I mean, obviously, there's a kind of a few devilish characters.
Yes, certainly.
And a satire. Maybe. It could be mistaken for a satire.
That's a good reading. You're coming up with some good stuff here.
I like symbolism.
Yes.
I'm beginning to think that life is entirely symbolic.
I too like to occasionally think that this isn't really happening.
Is this the real life?
Is
this just fantasy?
I'm not going to even continue finishing that plunge line.
But visually, it was very visually striking. Every scene was very intriguing. He does an amazingly transformative job as an actor. I mean, it's such a physical bunch of stuff he had to do.
Yeah.
I imagine he won prizes for this, did he?
He should have. Let's look that up. Awards for Holy Motors.
Holy Motors. Yes! Holy Motors even sounds like Holy Moses.
Yes.
That's another thing.
Seeing a lot of nominations and a few winners, but mostly for Carax, which is fair enough, but come on, give Denis Lavant some stuff. It was nominated for all the Caesars that year, but annoyingly did not win one.
Oh, really? I'm surprised.
No. Come on, the French.
Oh, no, don't do that. It's just rude. Sorry.
God.
You can cut that out if you want. That was an unprovoked, rude saying. Sorry, I'm 12.
Oh, fine. So yeah, I almost fear to ask this, but does anyone have anything you'd watch alongside it?
I think probably just stare at a wall to decompress from it.
I mean, I would recommend another surrealist film, but are you mad? That's probably going to contort people's brains even further.
As the resident David Lynch expert, do you think there are links there?
Oh, I would definitely say so, yeah, if only because they're drawing from the same pool, I guess. They're both, clearly big fans of Buñuel and Man Ray. I would say alongside it, I think Buñuel's The Golden Age would not be a bad thing to watch alongside it.
I don't know if I've seen any Buñuel.
Some of the French films I find a bit overly refined, but when he's good, he's great. But I would say my choice to watch alongside it is the more realistic film about a sinister con artist reshaping his persona to fit with everyone he meets, which would be the Safdie brothers' Good Time.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Aidan, you were on the show when we reviewed Good Time, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
Can you see the link there? Well, no would be the answer there. Just me. I think just because they both are fueled by these kind of identity-shifting, bravura central performances, and that otherwise they are very different in mood. Holy Motors is kind of languid and arch, and Good Time is like quite a long panic attack.
Yeah.
But I think, if you're looking for a performance that can sit alongside Denis Lavance and basically not be blown away by it, Robert Pattinson in Good Time is a solid choice.
Makes a bit more sense there, actually, now that you've explained it. Yeah.
Should we go for a break there?
Yeah, you can do. Just before you do, the literal translation of the name Oscar, which is his character name in this, is friend of a deer. And if she is Diana the Huntress, that would make sense.
Ah. That's good. I've got nothing to add to that. Right. So I didn't get to see Rambo because of family illness, but I do have a second film to review, which I'll surprise people with.
Okay.
Probably not that big a surprise, really. But so shall we sort of do it? Shall I go in with Ad Astra, then Sarah does the kitchen, and then
Yeah, can do.
So Aidan, if I'm last, do you want to do out next week?
Yeah, it also depends on this Wi-Fi because it's been absolutely horrendous on this end. I haven't been able to hear a thing.
Ooh.
So
okay then.
I mean, I can give it a try, but can't.
Right. Okay, well, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
So I'll just do a quick bump before we go back in. And if you're enjoying what you're listening to, you can donate to us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show. The Geek Show is our parent network. You can find the website at www.thegeekshow.co.uk, where you can also find the Geek Shop, where we sell our bags and shirts and other such goodies. We are on Twitter at TGS_The Geek Show, and you can find us on Facebook just by searching for The Geek Show. Right. So, if you do go onto thegeekshow.co.uk, you can find Rob's review of Freaks, a hot ticket from this year's Fright Fest.
Freaks?
Not the Todd Browning one.
Is that from the early 20th century one?
The 30s one.
Not the 30s one?
Not the 30s one.
Oh, okay.
A new film.
I last saw that in the 80s. That's the only time I've seen it. It was on Channel 4, not surprisingly.
Still subject to the longest ban in British cinema history, Todd Browning's Freaks. Yeah, about 30 years it was banned for.
It's a really good film.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah. I agree on that.
So yes, as we mentioned at the start of the show, we have a photo negative show this week, and we've all been to see new releases, and we've all gone horribly awry in that. Yeah.
I haven't, because I'm a peasant.
Some of us were let down by peasantry, as you say. Some of us were let down by local cinemas not putting the right films on.
The farewell.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I just did not have time to see Rambo: Last Blood, which I'm just crying about.
I'm sure, just ringing you.
I'm sure that
thing.
I'm sure that 30% on Rotten Tomatoes would be saying a different thing, Graham. I'm sure it would.
But I did manage to see a couple of things, and one of the things that I did see is, I would say, the big release last week, which is James Gray's Ad Astra, starring Brad Pitt as the inventor of the Vauxhall Astra.
It's a story that was just destined to be told. I mean, so many calls for its release and, exploration.
No, it's not about that at all, of course.
What?
You've got to save your big heavyweight biopics of important people for off the season, right?
I've been lied to.
No, this is a movie in what I guess you'd call a sort of subgenre that comes around every autumn. Does it not feel like every autumn there's a kind of a thinky science fiction film these days?
Well, I've got nothing to add to that. I don't know.
Okay.
I thought I had a point, but I don't.
Fair enough. No, it's like generally around this time of year is when you expect something like Interstellar or Arrival or The Martian or something like that to be released, I think.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
And this feels like it's in that lineage. Now, I think the problem here is the same problem I'm starting to have with that other resurgent subgenre of folk horror, which is that you've got a trend for something to be revived, but the canon of accepted classics is like about 3 or 4 movies.
Yes.
So who would you put in that category?
Well, for like this kind of intelligent science fiction, there's a lot of good movies, but try getting through a review of any of them without mentioning either 2001 or Solaris.
Right.
It's impossible. No one ever has. So This is kind of in that vein, but it has some other new moves that are interesting, and a lot of that I think is down to James Gray being the director. And
Yeah.
Gray is one of those directors who's always been kind of respected among the cognoscenti. I understand they worship him in France, but he's never had that big sort of commercial breakthrough that a lot of people would predict for him.
What's his name?
James Gray.
Oh, is he French?
He's not French, no. He's
Ah.
American, but he's big in France, like Jerry Lewis.
Okay.
They're the comparisons to Jerry Lewis must end, I feel.
And Petula Clark.
Yes. Oh, he's exactly like Petula Clark. There's no reason to distance him there at all. He started out making crime films, and he was perhaps the only person making crime films in the 90s who seemed like he wanted to be Francis Ford Coppola more than he wanted to be Quentin Tarantino. He's moved outside that into other genres, into romance with two lovers, into a sort of, I don't know what you'd call it because it's such an archaic genre, but the jungle exploration film with The Lost City of Zed. I had my problems with The Lost City of Zed because it's about a true story that I am mildly obsessed with, and I feel like in order to make the kind of solid, stirring, romantic throwback that James Gray is very good at, he had to ignore all of the parts of the true story that make his hero look like an absolute loon. Of which there were so many. But with Ad Astra, in a strange way, this is a more satisfying exploration film than The Lost City of Zed, even though the exploration in question is space. And it grapples more with the history of exploration. It is, as a lot of critics and Gray himself have said, heavily indebted to Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the added twist that the Kurtz figure in this case is also the father of the lead character. And this is a sort of common trick that a lot of blockbusters pull. I mean, you see a lot of films which aim to give a standard kind of genre movie story a bit more heft with some daddy issues, don't you?
Yeah.
To the extent where one of the minor revelations of Avengers Endgame for me was just in that whole time travel sequence, just realizing how many Marvel heroes have a bad relationship with their dads. It was like I was genuinely expecting Oprah to come in and just go, "You get the chance to patch it up with your estranged dad, and you get the chance."
Hey, as long as it's not Jeremy Kyle.
So yeah, that's familiar, but I think what sets Ad Astra apart is what I think generally sets James Gray's movies apart when they start to become generic, which is the sense that he really means this and has a lot of heart and soul invested in it. And there are bits in it that I think are slightly pulpy, some of which work. I love that it's got like moon pirates in it.
Do you think that's the Tarantino aspect?
Maybe, yeah. And I loved me some moon pirates. It is maybe kind of a gratuitous action beat, but they are moon pirates. There are other bits in it where I could feel the hand of the studio going, it's been quite a while without an action bit. We're spending a lot of money on you here.
Quick, let's have a buggy chase.
Yes. But I think what makes it sing is its essential sincerity. And in terms of the central character, Roy McBride, I think he's a really interesting character who we haven't seen in this kind of movie before. And the reasons why have sort of eluded a lot of critics, I find, because he's played by Brad Pitt in a performance that has got an awful lot of very strong reviews so far, and quite right too. And he is presented to you as almost like the perfect astronaut. You know, he goes for a medical and they say his heart rate has never gone above 85. Even when he's on a very dangerous mission, it never goes above it. And everyone is very admiring of this and says, you know, it's what makes him such an asset to NASA. But we hear his internal monologue. And what his internal monologue reveals to us is not that he's, you know, his heart rate never goes up because he's just so goddamn professional and brilliant. His heart rate never goes up because he is ruinously depressed. And I think one of the fascinating things about Ad Astra is that it takes the psychology of McBride and his father, who's played by Tommy Lee Jones, who I'd never thought of as being potentially Brad Pitt's dad, but as soon as you say it, you think, oh yeah, that works. And it takes the effect of their relationship on both of them very seriously. McBride Sr. has gone missing after a very ill-fated mission to Neptune, but there is a belief that a recent power surge emanating from Neptune, which starts to interfere with electrics on Earth in a really astonishingly tense opening sequence, might be something to do with the lost mission, that he might still be out there somehow, somewhere. And there's a point in this kind of science fiction movie. It's a point that comes up in Solaris and 2001. There, I've mentioned them both. There's a point where you start to expect the personal story to become more metaphysical, for them to encounter something in space, whether it's Kubrick's Stargate or Tarkovsky's Solaris, that literalizes the emotions that you're feeling. And that never happens in Ad Astra, which I found really fascinating. The relationship between Roy McBride and Clifford McBride matters right up until the ending, but it matters because we're emotionally invested in it. It doesn't matter because it's somehow connected to the ineffable forces of the universe or dark matter or something. It stays admirably focused on being a story of a father and his son trying to get out of his legacy, right to the end, in a way that I thought was almost daringly minimal for a movie this size.
So you were kind of, was there almost like a socket for that device to be plugged into, and yet it was filled with the emotions concerned and the relationship?
Yeah. I think it really easily could have gone to a place where, his father has ascended into a new form of being that is communicating with him telepathically, and it never ever does that. It remains pretty nuts and bolts throughout.
That's refreshing.
I enjoyed that a lot. I think as a film, it has some flaws. Like I say, it's got some of the action sequences feel gratuitous. I have to say, having seen a few of Gray's films, he writes very complex male characters, but the women not so much. And that still holds true here. There is a part for Liv Tyler that feels like it has mostly hit the cutting room floor. There is an appearance by Natasha Lyonne that, if it was any shorter, it would be a subliminal image.
Oh, wow. You can't waste Natasha... What was it?
Natasha Lyonne.
Yeah, you can't mess up Natasha Lyonne. She's always good value for money.
Yeah, I was annoyed by it too. I think Captain Howdy in The Exorcist gets more screen time than Natasha Lyonne in this.
Oh my goodness.
But there is one female role that I think is interesting, even though there is, again, only limited screen time. It adds a whole new twist to the story that I found refreshing, that when McBride gets to Mars, where his main mission will be launched from, he meets Ruth Negga.
Oh, yeah.
And I like Ruth Negga anyway. I think she's pretty fab. But her character in this is really interesting because she's almost the exact opposite of the McBrides. That this force that makes them so damaged, which is implicitly, the angst of going from the only planet humanity has ever known into the unknown. That is not felt at all by her character. Her character is a native Martian. She was born on a human colony on Mars. She has seen Earth precisely once when she was a child. She has no interest in going back there. And just putting a character like that in at a crucial moment in the plot made it feel more optimistic than it might have otherwise. It's fascinating to think that maybe in the future there will be people who are completely human but have never visited Earth and have no desire to visit Earth. And there's this sense of a problem being overcome there, even if the McBrides are too weighed down with their own personal interior problems to embrace that. And I quite liked that. I thought, even though the film, has its missteps, it also has little beautiful ideas like that. It has a gorgeous score by Max Richter. The cinematography is by Christopher Nolan's regular Hoyt von Hoytema. And it's to Hoytema's credit that it looks absolutely nothing like Interstellar, but it does still look really gorgeous. And overall, despite my nitpicks, I enjoyed it. I think it is worth seeing on a big screen. It's full of wonderful little sort of background futurist details, like the presence of that, neon cowboy statue in Las Vegas, Yeah, that's on the moon now.
The one that's always tipping his hat.
Yeah.
Or moving his leg or something.
Yes, that one. That's on the moon now. And I think a lot of the little subtleties of the world that Gray has built might not be visible on a small screen. So despite misgivings, worth seeing on as big a screen as you can. That's Ad Astra by James Gray.
Do you think it'd be good on IMAX then?
I would love to see it on IMAX.
I was pretty worried there because when you were talking about the folk horror thing earlier and how this is built from like 3 and 4 films, I was kind of getting worried saying, is this going to be another Midsommar? Is this going to be... But no, thank God, no, it wasn't.
One of the things that I think sets Ad Astra apart from Midsommar is the idea that Gray has not only seen the movies he's referencing, he may have understood them. So yes, you're up next, aren't you, Sarah?
I am. Right, so I am... What was that?
I don't know.
Oh well, it just went
from Neptune.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I'm going to talk about The Kitchen, directed by Andrea Berloff, which is the story of 3 women, Elizabeth Moss, Tiffany Haddish and Melissa McCarthy, whose protection racketeer husbands are jailed, making them have to take over the business reluctantly. The women, initially at least, take a more wholesome, kind of gentle persuasion approach, which is more successful in getting the shopkeepers on side with the new system. I think, looking at some of the response to this film, there's been sort of mixed reviews for it. But it's the first time Berloff has directed, although she has written a few screenplays before.
Most notably Straight Outta Compton, didn't she?
Yeah, she co-wrote that.
Yeah.
Oh,
wow. Yeah. She's come up. The main feel of this is that there's a lot going on with not as much time and depth as you would want. But it feels like she's an outsider looking into the world of male mob bosses, and I think her source material seems to have been mafia movies.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it's gone any deeper than that, really. There was some good moments where, for instance, you get a combination of what women kind of have to do normally, because they are still the primary caregivers, but they also have to work. So you get really nice moments where those two things are combined, even if you're a protection racketeer. So she's pushing her kids on the swing, but also negotiating with somebody who hasn't paid up, and she wants to get them on side. The scenes where the women gradually become more violent are believable. Some reluctant to sort of engage with that, but some, I mean, Elizabeth Moss' character takes to it like a duck to water. There's been some criticism of the strength of their violence being shocking. I guess that's because they're females, but it's nothing we haven't seen before from males. But I think it feels like they're only pushing back to the equal degree they've been oppressed. So it feels kind of logical looking at it. It's interesting that in this film, normally it feels like in cinema the women are allotted the job of moral guardian. And this is quite nicely reversed in this, where it's McCarthy's dad who takes up that role, and he's just like, oh, I don't know, women doing this, it's not right, etc. But then you also have the 70s sensibility. It's set in the 1970s, and I think probably 50% of the budget went on the Farrah Fawcett hair. And the other 50% on corduroy, pleather and brown paint.
Well, they've got the priorities right.
Absolutely. So as a first-time director, there is the odd clunky bit or missed opportunity, and it does feel uneven in parts where the tone can be a bit variable. So you'll get moments of kind of almost jokey sensibility, and then plunging into things that are really dark. So I wanted to see more about the organic growth of the motivation that turns them from wives and mothers into hardened criminals that just happen to have stepped out of a salon, but still. And it felt like there's 180 scenes in it, and that feels like a lot. And so I wanted the character, I wanted more to know about who they were before this happened, and to get an early scene of what their capabilities were, maybe. But there wasn't that. I mean, there's really not a great scene where Melissa McCarthy is talking to a room full of hardened criminals that used to have their husbands as manager, and she's basically, it's like she's giving a pep talk to a bunch of kids. She's going, come on you guys, if we just pull together and do the work. And it's just like, oh, really?
Let's put on the show right here.
In the old barn.
Montage music begins to play.
Yeah, I think some of the critics do talk about the montage sequences being a bit annoying after a while. At 1 hour 43, the film I think is a bit long. I'd have aimed for, obviously I'm happiest at 1.5 hours, but I think she's added in a storyline about expanding operations uptown in the Hasidic diamond selling quarter, which it doesn't really add very much, and it could have, if you'd whipped that out, it would have allowed more time to explore character in more depth, I think.
Yeah.
Also, which woman is doing which role, who fits into what are their roles in the gang? They're all kind of mushed together in generic sort of gangsterish roles without it being particularly explicit what their strengths are, except in the case of Elizabeth Moss. How much money is coming in? Where is it being spent by the main characters? I was quite disappointed at the end to not see a forensic accountant in the credits. There's one scene where the musician, the rapper Common.
Yeah,
he's in
Oh
it.
yeah.
And looking fine. And there's one scene where Common spends about 40 minutes shaking hands, which could have been reduced considerably. Interestingly, there's a guest cameo from Annabella Sciorra from the 80s. I think she was also in The Sopranos, funnily enough. The film itself, The Kitchen, originated as a graphic novel, which is a DC Vertigo production by Mick Doyle. And in the original graphic novel, there are similarities, like you don't find out much about their characters. They just seem to be plunged into this world. But the girls in that are basically poor, scrawny, scruffy, as if they are living hand to mouth, never sure where the next money's coming in, and which makes sense. Obviously, if you're living on street crime, it's so unreliable, and there's just no pension. So, I mean,
in this economy, yeah.
And that doesn't really translate to those to the film. Because, I mean, Melissa McCarthy's character is almost towards the middle class, really.
Yeah.
So from a feminist point of view, you could definitely say that this film, expresses what women are forced to push down on a daily basis. Because when you're oppressed, you feel, this surge of energy if you're given for instance, if the women are handed a weapon, you can understand why that weapon goes off eventually. It gives the female viewer the magic what if we were able to overcome our fear of the violence of men and force our voices out into the world. And there was obviously a power vacuum where they were able to step in and sort of test that. I think overall, it's probably like a standard 3-star movie, maybe 2.9 star, but yeah.
Wow, that's a fine scholarly gradation there.
That's better than me. Whenever I hit a movie, it's just immediate 1 star on Letterboxd.
So that's The Kitchen, directed by Andrea Berloff.
Your point about people being shocked by the violence reminds me a bit of the discourse that you've seen around Hustlers, the Levine Scafuri.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, I'd quite like to see that as well.
I'd like to see that. I haven't got around to it yet, but I've just seen so many people say, "Oh, am I supposed to find these characters admirable in what they do?" And it's like, well, maybe, I don't know. Why can't we just sort of? I don't think that the purpose of all this talking about strong female roles in film is to make it so that women on screen have to be paragons. I think you can absolutely have a female character who is the victim of sexism and also does some really stupid or bad things as a result.
Yeah,
of course, because women are human now, so that's nice.
Yeah,
it's good that we got round to that.
Yeah, I think I've heard the comparison points with The Kitchen with Widows too, which
yes, I think that's a very valid point. It seems to have expressed it in a more artistic and probably a deeper way, and the stakes are higher in that as well. It's less cartoony. It feels more realistic.
Yeah.
Along with some beautiful shots, obviously, from McQueen there.
Yeah.
The main criticisms of the Kitchen are that I've seen, on other people reviewing it, are that the scenes are too long, that the scenes are too short, that the women behave badly, that the fictional characters behave unrealistically, that Elizabeth Moss
is terrible, and there are some small cautions.
The Elizabeth Moss character is the best because she suffers the most. The Tiffany Haddish character is the best because, she can perform straight drama as well as comedy. And she's an actress, you say? Melissa McCarthy takes up too much space, that it has a too modern sensibility and isn't 70s enough when people didn't get murdered by the mafia in the 70s. Jimmy Hoffa. So yeah, I think at the end of it, it feels like the same comments we heard at the end, after the remake of Ghostbusters, and it just across as oh, women
Yes.
with the creative projects.
So yeah, I was going to balance that estrogen out with the testosterone overload of Rambo: Last Blood, a film which is so extraordinarily out of touch that it plays a gritty, slowed down version of Old Town Road over the trailer, which I don't think is a good choice at all. But I didn't get to see it. But fortunately, BBC Two came to my rescue, because without any sort of warning of, as it's called within the industry, promotion or advertising, they decided to release a completely new Werner Herzog film on Saturday night.
Oh.
You see, I when you said there was going to be a surprise announcement, I just immediately said, okay, what would tick Graham's boat? What would make him notice? And then I immediately thought, oh, wait, it's that Werner Herzog movie, isn't it?
Maybe the least surprising announcement I have ever made on this show, up to and including we'll be back next week.
So tell us all about it.
But yeah, Steps of Bruce Chatwin, by the great Bavarian himself. It's about the English author Bruce Chatwin, who Herzog was friends with for a great many years.
Oh, Songlines.
So the Songlines, yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
He adapted Chatwin's novel The Viceroy of Udia into Cobra Verde, the last of his collaborations with Klaus Kinski.
Oh, yes,
yeah. There are clips from a lot of Herzog's films in this, but the clips of Cobra Verde remind you just how terrifying Kinski was at that point of his life. He was never a comforting screen presence, but when you watch Cobra Verde, you just want to send out a restraining order to your DVD player. But this is a very sweet film, and I have slight reservations about it. It opens with quite a lot of drone footage, which, I mean, it's becoming a bit of a documentary cliche, and I was a bit disappointed to see Herzog succumb.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in the Michael Jackson documentary earlier
Which
this
is
year.
all drone. It's non-stop drone.
Leaving Neverland, that's it. That's the name of the film.
Yeah. Where someone made that and thought, oh, how can we possibly get over this small wall at Neverland Ranch? Better break the drones out. Herzog is, I guess, at least using it to show prehistoric megaliths, which is acceptable drone-y stuff.
Oh, fair enough. At least it's interesting, not just a giant sculpture of Michael Jackson.
Yes. But it was still, I think, not as revelatory as, for example, the scene where he just does a massive close-up on the skin of a particular spiky desert lizard, which is the kind of shot that only Herzog would think of throwing in there.
Oh, I quite like that idea.
Yeah.
I like a lizard.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd prefer a copulating CGI snake. Who wouldn't? But
well, as anyone who's seen his version of Bad Lieutenant knows, Herzog is wild for lizards, mad on them.
Oh, yeah.
There is a lot of that kind of discursive business that makes Herzog's films what they are. I think the important difference is in this context is that kind of discursiveness is also a big part of Bruce Chatwin's work as well. The film opens with the same anecdote from the beginning of his breakthrough novel in Patagonia about a strange artifact he found as a child that his family used to insist was the skin of a brontosaurus.
Right.
It's how every travel book should open. And And in Patagonia continues in that vein. It is less of a novel and a series of sketches. And similarly in the songlines, when he had trouble finishing that, he sort of, you know how, Sarah, you know how the book sort of opens up into a series of like anecdotes about nomads throughout history?
Yeah.
Which I think is really powerful. I think it's like the literary equivalent of the Stargate in 2001. It just becomes massive and experimental at that point. It's fantastic. But that sorry.
So I was just going to say I get the feeling with songlines of like roots expanding into the
earth,
into the wilderness, into the earth, and sort of the songlines being the like spiritual guide to that.
It's an incredibly profound book, which is not surprising considering that one of the things this documentary explores is that this material that the songlines expands into was material that he'd been reworking for most of his life.
Wow.
When he was young, he intended that his first book would be something called The Nomadic Alternative, which was almost going to be a polemic about how being a nomad was the natural form of human civilization and that we had made a mistake, essentially, by settling. But he could never get that right, and the only sort of hint of it in his later works is that remarkable last third of the songlines. So there is the opportunity to explore a bit more of his philosophy here. There is the opportunity to explore a bit more of the man, because as say Herzog was great friends with him throughout his life. When he was dying of AIDS, Herzog came to him with a documentary he'd made about the Wadabe, an African tribe that Chatwin had wanted to see but never got the chance to, and showed him his film about them.
Oh.
And
I always said Werner Herzog was such an old softie.
He is, yeah. That is a very...
yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, very noble thing to do.
It's a very moving part of the documentary, and you are reminded as well of what a frightening, unknowable disease AIDS was back in the 1980s.
Yeah.
For years, Chatwin pretended that his change in appearance was down to a tropical infection he got or a bite from a snake, and he was someone who lived the sort of life where people heard that and believed it.
Yeah.
But by the end of his life, and there is a clip from his last TV interview here, he is frighteningly emaciated, and it's a very disturbing thing to see.
Yeah, really gaunt.
Yeah. But the overall impression of it is very fond. Nicholas Shakespeare, his biographer, is interviewed, and I remember when Shakespeare's biography came out, it kind of... I definitely don't think Shakespeare intended this, but it did damage Chatwin's stock in literary circles for a bit, because there's a lot of anecdotes in there about how he sort of came about information, or how he was often a pretty problematic friend and husband to have, how he could be quite callous to people in the pursuit of his work, which people found a bit frightening, really. But most of those objections have sort of washed away now. And as for the complaints about the accuracy of some of his works, I mean, Shakespeare himself comes out with a line that you can imagine Herzog himself appropriating for his own work, which is that Chatwin never told a half-truth. He told the truth, then a half.
Yeah.
So I found it really affecting. I liked that finally there is a Herzog documentary with large passages set in England, which I've been waiting so long for. I thought, is he waiting to do every other country in the world before he gets around to us?
Where's Bruce Chatwin from, actually? He's English,
isn't he?
He's English, isn't he? Yeah. Let me just look him up. I can't remember. With me. Because I remember hearing about this at Sheffield Dockfest and just immediately think, where's Bruce Chapman from again?
Mm.
Sheffield, that's the one. He's born in Sheffield.
Interesting, right. I was unaware of that because he was one of those people who never really came across as being from anywhere. You know, he wrote books set in South Africa, in Australia, in South America. You know, he was a genuinely international figure of the type that we don't have enough of now. And I think Herzog's film is in a more serious register than a lot of his recent stuff. It has, you know, the odd longer, the odd bit that I don't think quite came off, but his love for Chatwin is palpable, and for that reason, more than any, I enjoyed it an awful lot. And that's Nomad in the Footsteps of Bruce Chatwin, which is available on BBC iPlayer for the next month or so.
Oh, cool.
Yes, I'll definitely be having a look at that because I noticed the what was it? The new documentary on Harvey Weinstein's up there too, as well, isn't it?
Oh, really?
Yes.
Does it focus on his solid work at Miramax?
It focuses on his entirely worthwhile campaign to get Shakespeare in Love Best Picture. Yes.
Yes. No controversy there. No controversy there.
I quite fancy watching that. Sorry. I was going to say I just.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I quite fancy watching that Nomads.
I think if you have any fondness for Chatwin, and I know you do, you'll enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I think Songlines was the kind of book that I absorbed osmotically. It just felt like it fell through my skin and put me in Australia, and it was beautiful.
That's exactly what it's like. Yes, that's fantastic.
Okay, so moving on to next week's releases. On Wednesday, the 25th of September, we have Ready or Not, the horror film that I've heard very promising things about, actually.
Yeah, me too.
We have Don't Let Go coming out on Friday, starring David Oyelowo, Storm Reid, Brian Tyree Henry's in this too, Alfred Molina.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know much about that one. It's 100 plus screens across the country. We have a film that I have heard a little bit about, Hotel Mumbai.
Yes.
I think it's a thriller starring Dev Patel, Armie Hammer, Jason Isaacs, that crowd.
It's a true life story about the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks.
Oh, the trailer looks good for that.
Yeah. Jason Isaacs was on the Radio 5 film show the other week, which I know he's so out of their comfort zone, but he was talking about it, and he did talk very passionately about it.
Yeah. We have One Child Nation coming out from Curzon Artificial Eye. We have Sea of Shadows coming out from Dogwoof. So numerous 25 plus screens in the country. We have Skin, which I mention as the only time I'll ever see Jamie Bell tattooed up. Just gonna leave that one in for free. The Goldfinch, the Nicole Kidman, Jeffrey Wright, Sarah Paulson movie that I remember hearing. It was either the response from Toronto or one of the big Canadian film festivals. I remember the response being not as enthusiastic as what I would have hoped being.
Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews.
It's tanked pretty hard, hasn't it? Yeah.
Is it from the Donna Tartt novel?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
I've never read, but I've thought, if you want to know why this hasn't done well at the box office, just my feelings watching the trailer as someone who hasn't read the book were just complete confusion. What I got from it is that there's a bomb that goes off,
Mm.
and then there's a painting. But then the kid who's in the bomb blast grows up, but then someone comes to him and asks, "Hey, where's that painting then?" And I'm just thinking, how are these parts supposed to connect? Not in an enjoyable mystery way. It's like, why is everyone obsessed with the painting in the midst of this horrible act of terrorism? I found it completely impenetrable.
I thought that was the story, what you just said. So he's in the bomb blast, and that he can't. His mum maybe gets killed, but in her place, he takes the painting, and that becomes his emotional connection. And then it comes out at the end that it was him that stole the painting. Except we already know that.
Yeah.
I
We've all been in those situations where you just can't find your mum, so you just grab the nearest Renaissance masterpiece.
Listen, if there's a woman who's in love with the Golden Gate Bridge, then, physical relationship with the Golden Gate Bridge. I kid you not. Objectophilia or whatever it's called.
I'm just thinking... I'm just thinking in terms of radio advertisements now. Have you confused your mother simply by thinking of the latest Renaissance artist? Why don't you go see the Goldfinch today?
Are you lonely, confused, and want to spend time with something that'll transport you from one end of a river to another? Then why not?
After that, we have 2 more releases. The last 3, another 25-plus screen. And tomorrow, the Martha Pinson movie starring Sebastian Street, Stuart Brennan, Stephanie Leonast, and Sophie Kennedy-Clark. That's your lot so far. And I think, judging from the planner, spoiler alert, it's going to be Ready or Not.
Yes, Ready or Not, here it comes.
Oh, bravo. Well done.
Someone had to.
We can't hide.
So yes, until next week with Ready or Not, that's been your lot from Cinema Eclectica. I've been Graham.
I've been Aidan.
And I've been Sarah. Ta-ta.
Excellent. Right, I'll stop that. And what number is it? 223.
Yeah.
Good job, guys.
Right.
223.